Gen Z, what is up, man? Gen Z, what is up? My name is Sadiq Spears, and it is not a podcast. It is a show where we bring the most pertinent topics pertaining to Gen Z, whether that's within business, politics, or media. The idea is to help y'all be perceptive to what? Build perspective. Yes. I hope you like the little intro music, okay? Listen. We're not in studio today. That's okay. On the road a little bit. Could not record in the studio. But listen, this lets y'all know that, stuff can just move around. But we're here every week. And we have a slew of topics to get to. Listen, Zohran Mamdani has won the NYC mayoral race, and Democrats have swept across the nation, within California, within Virginia, within New Jersey. We're going to talk about that. Trump has threatened military action in Nigeria over alleged mass amounts of killings of Christians. We're also definitely going to talk about that. And then a little bit of a market update. Trump met with China, and they went over some tariffs and stuff like that, 10% slash. And then the AI trade, markets has been in turmoil right now, saying that the AI trade might be over. Talk about that. I'm not really that convinced. But let's first talk about this NYC mayoral race. Zohran Mamdani has officially won, has beat Kurasliwa and beat Cuomo in this year's race a couple of days ago. Amazing stuff, first of all, over when it comes to just Gen Z. I mean, Gen Z's voter turnout, I think it's one of the highest since somewhere in the 1900s, late 1900s, obviously. But one of the highest turnouts regarding younger people, regarding people of color. It was just really good turnouts. And it's just a good day for New York. It felt like a good night for New York, especially for the last couple of elections. Now, many things to talk about regarding this election. First of all, many communities that he did not win in the first primary election against Cuomo, like Brooklyn communities, like Bronx communities, something that he was adamant in this campaign was about running it and making sure that he goes and visits those places. Since then, I'm pretty from the numbers looks, he won in most of Brooklyn, aside from Park Slope or Greenpoint, and Southern Brooklyn, but in places in which he did not win beforehand that revolved people of color, I'm pretty sure that he won more over in this race. So definitely something that I've been paying attention to. Now, look, people have been asking me, Sadiq, what do you think about this NYC mayor race? Now, people already know that I like Zohran, of course, but the conversations and the pushback that I've been receiving, mind you, I'm in New York, so we talk about this often. The pushback that I've been receiving is that all right, well, he's a socialist. What is going to be the pushback now? What's going to happen with the city? How are we going to look? What it's going to turn into? My first point is, a democratic socialist, I would urge a lot of people to go look that up versus a regular socialist. I think when people think about that, they think of it like Russia, think of it like Patrice Lumumba versus all right, within a democratic nation, a capitalist nation, what does it look like to operate with some socialist policies, maybe free childcare, free city ride buses, city run grocery stores, those type of policies that may align with a democratic socialist. It's just different from a regular socialist. Now, aside from all that, a huge pushback that Zohran's been getting has been, how is he going to be able to accomplish this in Albany? Right? I saw this on the Flagrant podcast. I also saw this on the Joe Budden podcast. This has been a main common talking point about how is Zohran going to get this done or accomplished in Albany, right? Now, personally, I don't think that's a question to have on Zohran. At that point, that is a question for the people. What are we going to do if Zohran gets into the position that we have elected him to get into and the bureaucracy then stops him? That's really the question. And to me, I think the idea is to make all these people that's in those positions seats like hot water under them. It's going to feel like it's burning, and they got to make sure that whatever that Zohran is pushing, those specific policies that people want, that they elected him to get into, those need to get passed, or they just need to get something shaken. For example, I believe in order to get the 200,000 affordable housing units, he needs $70 billion from the state, right? The debt limit for that is the debt limit for that is $30 billion, which means that he's going to need Kathy Hochul, the governor, and then other state legislators to get on board for him to do so, right? So let me list out some names. MTA Chair Jeno Lieber. That's one. Kathy Hochul, which is the governor. That's two. 3. Carl E. Heastie, Speaker of the New York State Assembly. Andrea Stewart Cousins, Majority Leader and President Pro Tem of the New York State Senate. Michael Generis, Deputy Majority Leader of the New York State Senate. Liz Krueger, Chair of the Senate Finance Committee. These are the state legislators or the people that they're speaking about when they mean Albany. So, half of them are up for re-election come next November. Now, I'm not saying that we need to reseat everybody. That's not my problem. But I think we should know their names. I think when they start to come upon those ballots, New Yorkers across the state in general should know those names, because now this is not a Zohran fight. This is a New York fight. And I get the biggest example of that is Zohran being a democratic socialist and him not being, backed by Kathy Hochul before the primary win or by establishment Democrats. This is a people-ran election right here. The people wanted Zohran, not the established Democrats that might already be in Albany, right? So this is already an uphill battle by just electing him, but the second uphill battle is now getting it through Albany, which I don't want to just leave up to Zohran. You know, I was talking to my pops about this as well too, and he was giving me that pushback as well, but like, hey, we'll see what happens. And I hate that idea of that. Like, what do you mean we'll see what happens, or we'll see if it works? That's our job to do. We got to see if it'll work. We got to see if it'll happen, you know? And like, if the idea is for affordability, you know, affordability is the core issue right here, is that like we have corporations that's able to buy up significant pieces of New York. And yet most people that's in there are getting bought out, getting pushed out, and the culture of New York is not staying the same, or the image of New York is not staying the same. Now, I agree with evolution. Stuff needs to evolve, and places need to also be nicer, but you can preserve communities while you do that. You can preserve people while you do that. Ultimately, I just think that it is our fight to push. It is our fight to do. And, you know, maybe I'm young. Maybe some people may call me radical, but I don't think that that's too much to ask of citizens. You know? So Zohran not only had my vote and my support, but Zohran also has my support going forward. And I'm also going to hold him to the fire. You know, if he just gets there and sits there, does nothing, I'm going to have a problem with that. But until then, you know, we need to fight. We need to fight. And half of them, again, and Governor Kathy Hochul is up for re-election next year in November. So, or within 2027. So regardless, what needs to happen is that we hold all of them to the fire, because those are the people that they're talking about with Albany. And Kathy Hochul already said, let me pull this up. Let me just make sure. Kathy Hochul already said that she was against kind of raising taxes on wealthy people, that's not going to solve affordability. Wealthy people and corporate businesses, let me make that a fact, that's not going to solve affordability. Listen, Kathy, let me tell you something, man. 1 year, November 2026. November 2026. Now, granted, I don't like the person that's running against her, but regardless, 1 year. And that's where that needs to be, I guess, Americans and New Yorkers' runway to get a lot of this stuff done, kind of like a blitz like Trump has been doing in administration. Okay. Have I done this all? Those are his main obstacles in Albany, and those are the things that I'm looking at going into the next year. Now, I like Zohran, you know. I guess we're getting a little bit too much into the politics, because to be honest, although I'm not a big, I support voting for most people. I support voting in my community because I just feel like it's often looked too much down upon. I think there needs to be different elements when it comes to liberation. I think there needs to be different elements when it comes to, I don't know, like bettering our communities. And I think politics and voting is one lane. It might be only 25% of that lane, you know, but that's something that everybody can do. That's not everybody that's, you know, American citizen can do. and it's not so time consuming. It's not so, intensive for you to do. Some people, it's hard to do communal work. My thing is voting should be 10%, 25% of the work that you actually do as an individual. But most people don't do that work as an individual. So the voting is the least thing you could do. And I'm not going, I said this to my Instagram note, but a shot in the dark is still a shot. And I truly believe in that. So the last thing I'm going to do is just not vote because, I think you should vote because a shot in the dark is still a shot. All right. How y'all doing out there, man? How's y'all weeks? Go ahead, put that in the comments. Speaking about that shot in the dark is still a shot. I wanted to read. I'll read the comment and then I'll read the response because I posted this on my Instagram. But it was just something that really stuck with me that somebody said in one of my comments. The video's been going up, the views been going up and stuff like that. So I've been getting a lot more comments. It's good though because I like to engage, and I think people know that I like to engage in general. But I just really do. And any type of conversation that I'm willing to have, just because, why not at times, as long as it's not like detrimental to the mental, which is what I was speaking about. So let me pull the screenshot. Okay. This is what one of the commenters said. You're not losing me. You're now going down a rabbit hole. The world is a one big lie. We can sit here all day and talk about the evil world and never live in peace. You're just a young lad, and I can see that you're now seeing the world for what it is. You have to make a decision if you want to be a part of it or not. I choose Jesus because he teaches us not to get caught up like a fish in a net. I guess he's responding to me. I think it was about Venezuela and just speaking about kind of grim stuff. And basically that's his response to that, or his comment for it. This is my response. I said, it is not a balance, but a give and take. Although I'm affected by the things I talk about and learn, and often it can be grim, I find joy and hope most in community. I also feel most connected to God when next to community. So using my media skills to assist it and build communities and build businesses centering it is really a cool plus that came at the intersection of a bad job market. But serving the community served me well. Opportunities, referrals, friends, mentors, love. I don't mind a rabbit hole to preserve that, and I can't subscribe to isolation. Staying in a loop accounts for others who cannot, and those others just so happen to look like me. But it doesn't have to consume your life. Take trips, unplug, be in nature, read your Bible, but lock in. I got another X amount of years on this earth, and I'm not staying here idle. Me talking about perspective. Perspective has a purpose, a platform for perspectives by perspective. Gen Z forward, future forward, making these dense topics more accessible. Platforming people that actually care and have backing. You should check more of us out, and I appreciate your thoughts. The reason why I wanted to share that with y'all is just because I do talk about a lot of grim stuff and grim news. And although it can be affecting, I hope y'all see that sometimes I be smiling when I talk about these topics. And it's not just I'm laughing or I care, but it's, I do care, but it's not I'm just laughing and I just don't care. It's that I find hope in a lot of the stuff that we can talk about, or in the framing that we do talk about these things. Although I spend a lot of time researching it and stuff like that, I do this so people can learn. I do this so people can see a little bit behind the veil sometimes, because sometimes a lot of this language is just inaccessible. It's hard to read. It's hard to understand. And sometimes you're getting all this information blitzed at you at once, right? The political climate right now is just blitzing information at once. And it's just hard to consume that. And, I've taken up the mantle of being able to digest it a little bit and then regurgitate it. But I don't think it has to be that taxing on you. This stuff is taxing, but it shouldn't have to be. And you should be able to find different pockets that keeps you grounded. It keeps you, in your personhood, but being able to still be attached to society, so you can make sure that your one vote or your one input in society, it matters. And not just matters for, I guess, the preserving of society, but maybe some people that are not as represented in that society. And it doesn't have to be as detrimental. It doesn't have to be black and white. Even talk about Zohran, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, we'll see if it happens. That's a pessimistic way to look at it. I think you could just join it, be a part of the change, that make sure that it happens. And I don't think that's too hard to ask. I don't. Okay, so another big topic. Trump threatens military action in Nigeria. Now, this was crazy. Trump says he's going to do things to Nigeria. In a Truth Social post, Trump says he's going to do things to Nigeria that Nigeria is not going to be happy about and go into a now disgraced country, guns a-blazing. This was in a Truth Social post, right? Low-key similar to conversations about Venezuela, going in. Venezuela, he didn't even say anything. He just moved up military personnel and then, bombed up some boats. But in this, he's now threatening military action against Nigeria. Now, what is his justification? He says that 3,100 Christians were killed within this year. And that's saying that this is a extreme mass amounts of killings done on Christians, and that Americans need to protect Christians around the world. And Nigeria, I guess, is carrying out, or groups in Nigeria is carrying out these attacks. Now, this is why it's always important to go read. BBC put out an amazing article detailing what are these claims that's being brought about against Nigeria. Is this just Nigeria, the government specifically? Is this groups within Nigeria? And is it specifically religious persecution, or is it just terrorist groups? Because there's terrorist groups that could be around that kill people in general, and those just so happen to be Christians, God forbid. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's religious persecution, because that is a big claim, a huge claim, especially especially with everything that's going on around the world, with Palestine, with Israel, and with kind of like even NYC, with how much that's come about in the conversations in the NYC mayor primary. Okay, now, that was his justification, that there was 3,100 Christians killed. So doing a little bit of research and going into that BBC article, there's a couple of things that I definitely want to highlight, and conversation points that was brought up. Okay, first, speaking to the 3,100 Christians that were killed, he's referring to an Open Doors report. Now, there's a lot of organizations within Nigeria that might be independent, or there might be a NGO, non-government organization, or a government organization that will report on deaths or abuses within Nigeria. There's a bunch of organizations around the world that do this. This is a specific Christian organization or a charity that researches the persecution of Christians worldwide. That is what Trump is reciting. So 3,100 Christians killed from October 2023 up until now, which is like the 12-month span. No, okay, I said that wrong. 3,100 Christians killed for a 12-month span in October 23, which is reported by Open Doors, which is a charity that researches the persecution of Christians worldwide. Come to see in that same report, 2,300 Muslims was killed as well. Now, I'm not condoning any killing. That is about a 700 person death difference between the Christians and the Muslims. So it doesn't look like it's exactly religious persecution. It just so happens, if you don't know about Nigeria as well, Nigeria is half Muslim and half Christian, generally. And most of the Christians are in the northern part of Nigeria. Okay, so a little bit more into the article, because the article does a great job detailing this. Trump has said that 3,100 statement, but also Bill Maher has said that Christians are having a genocide in Nigeria, and has put numbers of over 100,000 dead in Nigeria, Christians killed. Also, Ted Cruz has been said that there's been multiple Christians killed in Nigeria, and the backing of this is from a Islamic terrorist group, Boko Haram. Boko Haram has been in the news for years of doing captures, killings, just crime all across Nigeria, and they're associated with the term jihadist, which is just like Islamic extremists. Okay, to get a little bit specific, Ted Cruz and Bill Maher, who said that either 50,000 or 100,000 Christians were killed in Nigeria, has been quoting Inter-Society, which is a organization in Nigeria that has been reporting on abuses in Nigeria. In its report published in August, which was an amalgamation of previous research and updated numbers for 2025, it said jihadist groups in Nigeria had killed over 100,000 Christians in the 16 years since 2009. It also notes that 60,000 moderate Muslims, in comparison to like extreme Muslims, that's their words, also died during this period. Inter-Society did not share an itemized list of sources, making it hard to verify the total number of deaths it reports. Fast forwarding into 2025, again, I'm referencing the BBC article. Inter-Society concluded that between January and August, just over 7,000 Christians were killed. This is another figure that has been widely shared on social media, etc., etc. Inter-Society includes a list of 70 media reports as some of the sources to its findings on the new attacks against Christians in 2025. But in half of these cases, the original news stories did not mention the religious identity of the victims. An example that they provided was Al Jazeera. They said 40 Christians died in this occurrence. And in that Al Jazeera post, it said nothing about being Christian. So meaning that they might be over-indexing on how many Christians they're claiming that have died in these attacks. Also, it's not even just, I guess, Inter-Society and BBC talking about this, but in Nigeria, multiple officials have said that this is not a persecution against Christians. This is really just many extremist groups, terrorist groups, carrying out crime, and this has been done on Muslims as well. Actually, in one of the, even in Reuters, but in multiple organizations that reported on this, has said that the same amount of Muslims has been killed, if not more, has been killed by these jihadist groups versus Christians. So the conversation is just, why is this being focused on during this time, and why Nigeria? Now, ACLED, which is another organization that's independent, that reports on numbers or monitors violence within West Africa, has reported that it found just under 53,000 civilians, Muslims and Christians, have been reported killed in targeted political violence since 2009. From the period of 2020 to September 2025, ACLED says that about 21,000 civilians were killed in abductions, attacks, sexual violence, and the use of explosives. It identified 384 instances where Christians were specifically targeted from 2020 to 2025, in which 317 people died, meaning they account for just a small proportion of those killed, meaning that Christians in specifically was not targeted or persecuted, judging by their numbers. And this is just another separate organization. So to be honest, we're all reporting on multiple different separate organizations reporting. It's just that these organizations, or this organization that said that it was a small number of Christians that's actually been killed, has a lot more viable and verifiable sources versus the other two that's been commonly used by Ted Cruz, Bill Maher, and Trump. I don't know why those statistics are being uplifted and the other ones aren't. I've heard from major news publications, not just BBC, but also Reuters, that said that many Muslims were killed as well. So it just feels like a terrorist group across the board. Now, of course, we can all assume as to why maybe Trump and Pete Hegseth, which is Department of War, they're gearing up more for war-ready situations. It's just been reported that Pete Hegseth has also now stopped arming his troops up with kind of like peaceful tactics, but more now with war-ready tactics. So it seems like this is just the status quo at the moment, and it's going to be for the next couple of years. That is, first happened with Venezuela, taking strikes on international waters in the Caribbean, but now talking about maybe going boots on ground in Nigeria over the death of Christians that is being manufactured by some of these organizations. And when I mean death of Christians, I'm talking about the specific death to Christians. If many Muslims are dying at that point, I don't think that's religious persecution. But still a point for not only I guess the administration to talk about it, but the media to talk about, which is just kind of it's sad because it's like dog whistling to deaths. You know, you're dog whistling something that's very important and crucial to people, which is religion, and then saying that they're being persecuted specifically somewhere in an African nation that nobody's going to do research for. Nobody's going to look that only 3,100 Christians were killed compared to 2,300 Muslims. That's not religious persecution. That's just a sad humanitarian crisis. That's what it sounds like to me. That sounds like people that are being persecuted, but it doesn't look like religious persecution, and it's being framed and demonized as if this is religious persecution that's going to make people drive up and feel an emotion on, domestic shores and not know exactly what's going on over there. So when military action happens over there, then people feel right here that they feel justified that it's happening. People are calling out. I think Nicki Minaj called out and said, thank you, Trump, for helping out the Christians over there. Man, like, just read a couple articles. The BBC article is linked in the description. Read the article. All right. Talked about Zohran. Talked about the military actions happening in Nigeria. I think it's time to talk about markets. Okay? I wish I had a little bell. Next time I'm going to have a little bell, ring a little bit so we could talk about that. So last week, Trump met with the leader of China, and they went over a couple of key things. One, Trump said that he's going to impose 100% tariffs on China the week before that meeting, which sent the markets into a spiral. But then he calmed to his senses. We already know how it goes. He calmed to his senses. He said he's probably not going to do that. Meets with the leader. He actually cut fentanyl, I think it's exports, or I don't know if it's imports, fentanyl tariffs by 10%. So it's at 20%, cut it to 10%, and then delayed export controls on rare minerals and rare earth stuff like soybeans and stuff like that by a year. And China did the same. So all that trade talks that was happening for the last couple of years, couple of weeks, still has not imposed any real damage on China. They just delayed it for another year. In addition to that, China agreed to that same soybean rare earth, so now we're able to export that, and our farmers are happy. Now, getting into a broader conversation of markets and AI, because that's just been a big conversation right now, is the AI trade over? Because markets are now very, very overvalued when it comes to the AI trade, right? Like NVIDIA, Broadcom, OpenAI, which is not even public, but is talking about $1 trillion valuation. Many companies are just ballooning in valuation, and yet we're trying to see if it's materializing into revenue. Meaning that, like, their company, everybody's buying into the company, throwing money into the company, and making the share price go up because people believe in in those companies, the market. But yet, is the revenues, is how much this company's making catching up to that company? That's the big conversation. So when people say bubble, that's what they mean. That is everything ballooning so high to the point where it might pop, and we're all looking at the valuations like this is not going to add up. This is not going to make sense. And all these companies come down at the same time. It triggers somewhat of a correction, maybe a crash, and the market is going to see heavy, heavy red for a while. That is what people are scared of, and that's what they mean by a market bubble. I'm not too convinced at the moment. I do believe that we are in somewhat of a bubble, but I do believe that there's some companies within AI that's just going to kill. I think Broadcom and NVIDIA are just going to kill. I think TSM, which is Taiwan Semiconductor, and NVIDIA, some of these AI companies make money and the revenue's good, and they have a good niche product that's not going to shy away. NVIDIA's revenue profit margin is high. They're booked up for years. That's going to be a profitable company. That's going to be a profitable company for a while. And just at the moment, I'm not convinced because we have interest rates coming down, which means that the Fed is lowering interest rates. When they lower interest rates, that means that the companies now it's a little bit less expensive for them to go borrow money. And since they can go borrow money, they can go buy more stuff. When they buy more stuff, the economy starts to spur a little bit more. Right? IPOs come, which means companies start to go public. And there's just a lot more money moving around in finance, in the banking industry, and Wall Street. So Fed funds are coming down, Fed interest rates are coming down, money's starting to move around. I just doubt that this is when the bubble is going to pop. This is when, when I was working at the bank 2 summers ago, they were waiting on this. That was 2 years ago. They were waiting on this. So I just don't expect that in the next 1-2 months that this is going to be the time in which that bubble pops. I would see it maybe when the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, gets replaced, I believe in May, or somewhere between January and May. And that's when we'll see a lot more, I guess, like, tumultuous times. But I do believe that time right now that we're talking about, the AI trade, it's just not going to go away for right now. I don't think that there's a huge rotation yet. Like, people are going to talk about rotation into small caps, but small businesses, medium-sized businesses, we're still scared about those tariffs. So if they're still maybe facing those downward pressures, then mega caps, AI trade is still going to be at the top of mind for most people. Now, I'm getting into the little gibberish lands. I hope y'all are still here. There's a couple of people that are locked in with me, but I want to make this a main segment on the show. It's because I watch markets every day, so why not talk about it? And it's very interesting. And what I mean by the AI trade, some Wall Street conversation and talks, it just means that you're betting big on AI. You're betting big on those companies. Mind you, they don't always have to be, the ones that are destroying the world. You don't have to invest into Palantir. You don't have to invest into Tesla, even though Tesla's not destroying the world. I just think Elon is. But, you don't have to invest into some of these things. You could just, invest into, I don't think NVIDIA is the world's worst company. I don't think TSM is the world's worst company, and they do a lot of green work. There's worse companies that there's out there that you should stay away from. Lockheed Martin, those type of companies. But when you think about the AI trade, I think it'll still be profitable up at least until past January. After January, that's when markets start. Second and third year of presidencies don't always see the best in the markets. And, there's a lot more of like uphill stuff. Trump had a lot to prove in his first year. Second year, I think he's able to do a lot more that he wants, and it's not going to have to has to appeal to some type of public perception, which means that those markets might come down. And I'm going to be a little bit more protective going into the next year. Granted, I just made one of my biggest purchases a week ago and one of my biggest trades that I've done so far. So we'll see. I'm betting on Netflix right now. And it's a pretty big bet, but I'm swinging big for something. So that's just what I've been looking at, is those type of companies. And in that conversation, I don't believe that the AI trade is over. Okay. Perspective. Let me just. It's been a good day. It's been a good day. With that though, I hope y'all weeks have been good. If you have any topics that you want me to talk about next week, for sure, for a fact, I'll be doing a deep dive on Sudan. So, of course, stay tuned. I'm excited. More breaking news to come. Also, last part. Breaking news. Should I play a little bit? Is it going to play? Can you hear it? Yes. Y'all hear that? Okay. It's not funny though. So, breaking news, Trump, or the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of Trump to delay SNAP benefits temporarily, which means that they have ruled in favor for Trump to temporarily delay those SNAP benefits from the first court, because the first court hasn't been able to decide. They said that the first court did not give ample time to decide on whether or not Trump can hold back those SNAP benefits. So the Supreme Court resided over the second court that said Trump needs to pay that stuff. Trump needs to pay benefits. But the Supreme Court has went over that and said, no, we're going to yield to the first decision and say they need more time to figure it out. So while they have more time to figure it out, we're going to stop giving out SNAP benefits. The Supreme Court just ruled that. It is 10 o'clock on a Friday night. That's crazy. That's just crazy. Like, why fight tooth and nail? Trump. I've been seeing off of Aaron Parnars. Shout out Aaron Parnars, who's been putting out breaking news information for I don't know how long, but it's great information. And been just he's been gun ho. Trump has been gun ho on trying to block giving out SNAP benefits. Like, this has been a main thing. This has been main thing, even with this Democratic sweep that's happened across the nation, where in New Jersey, in Virginia, in California, where Prop 50 passes, like this, even against that whole backdrop, he's still trying to push against affordability and handing out SNAP benefits to the 42 million Americans that depend on it. Twilight Zone. And touching on that, because I don't know if I spoke about that before I go. Yeah, Prop 50, they announced in California that Prop 50 was like a proposition that was put up during their, the same NYC mayor race. Virginia it was election day, and that was to focus on the redrawing maps of California to match what they did in Texas, was redraw the maps. So now I'm pretty sure that Congress is still going to be balanced between Republicans and Democrats going into the next election. So I guess that was a big thing for Democrats. They needed to pass that in order to kind of keep a balance within the redistricting maps, and that did happen. And in New Jersey, they won with Democrat. Virginia, they won a Democrat. I think there's a first black mayor woman in Albany, I believe. I don't know, just a whole sweep across the board. And granted, I am a Democrat, but not a huge establishment Democrat. I'm way more just, I like some people, I like some policies, and they just do better for my community more than Republicans. But it's not it's not love. But, Zohran, yes, great week for New York. And on that note, listen, love y'all. Hope y'all liked the little perspective music in the beginning. And I will see y'all next week. Be perceptive, build perspective, and, Gen Z, what is up? I'll see y'all next week. Love.